second with this thing. Okay. Let's see. We'll speak about Tisha B'Av, the month of Av. The Gemara tells us, Omer Rav Yehuda, Brei de Rav Shmuel bar Shilas, Mishmei de Rav. Rav Yehuda, the son of Rav Shmuel bar Shilas, said the name of Rav. Just as when the month of Av begins, we minimize our involvements of joy. Identically, when the month of Adar begins, we increase our level of joy. Meaning, to the degree that we minimize our joy, on an extreme level, we should increase it in abundance during the month of Adar. I mean, as great as Adar is, that's how deficient and disappointing and painful is the month of Av. Matim b'simcha. As a result of the Chet HaMeraglim, the Jews were meant to go into Eretz Yisrael the second year of the desert. All of a sudden, the last moment, they come up with this request. They want to send spies. And the basis for this initiative, for this request, was because they didn't trust Hashem. They doubted God's intention. They believed God, Hashem, was out to destroy them. They knew it was a land of giants. They didn't know what to degree. They said, we want to send spies or scouts. They came back with ominous reports. 12 spies. 10 of the 12 came back with disastrous reports. 2, Yeshua and Kolev, came back to the contrary. But of course, Klal Yisrael believed the 10 over the 2. The night that they came back was the night of Tisha B'Av. And they cried and they bemoaned their fate. And they said, we should die in this desert. We regret we ever left Egypt. And God says, as you said, you should die in the desert, and you should never left Egypt. You will die in the desert, and you will never see the land. However, their demise will not be instantaneous, because it will be a chil Hashem. It will be a desecration of God's name. Because what is the world going to say? They're going to say that God did not have the ability to take them into Canaan. They will pass away over a 40-year period. And only after 40 years passed was the new generation able to enter into Eretz Yisrael. But the words of Chazal, just as that night of the 9th of Av, the crying was a baseless crying. Because if they would have had faith, based on what they saw and what they understood, what God's ability is and what his relation with him was to them, and they turned their backs on that, he says, in the future, you're going to cry a bechir shel chinam. I'll give you what to cry about. Therefore, from that moment going forward, etched in stone, that all tragedies that came upon Klal Yisrael, Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, is that day. That's the day of tragedy. It's designated for all time as the day of tragedy. And the Mishnah goes to enumerate that the Mishnah says, Chamisha dvorim iru es avusein b'shivos b'Tammuz. 5 tragedies took place on Shivos b'Tammuz, the 17th of Tammuz. V'chamisha b'Tisha B'Av, and 5 tragedies took place on Tisha B'Av itself. B'Shivos b'Tammuz nishtabru haluchos. Moshe came down from the mountain. God says to Moshe, Lech reit kishi chesamcha. You must descend immediately because your people have become corrupted. They did idolatry, comes down, he sees what's going on, he smashes the Luchos Rishonos, the first tablets. Ubotel atomid, the tomid, the communal law ceased to be. Hufko ir, the wall was breached, which led to the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. V'sorav apostimus es haTorah, apostimus, he burnt the Torah. V'hemid selam behechol, he put an idol in the sanctuary. These are the 5 tragedies of Shavuos B'Tammuz. Chamisha b'Tisha B'Av. What were the 5 in Tisha B'Av? Nigzal v'seinu shlo yikon oretz. The first tragedy was, it was decreed that our forefathers should not go into the land, but rather they perish in the desert. V'chorav habayis b'rishona u'b'shniya. The first and second Beis Hamikdash were destroyed. V'nilkato Beitar. Beitar was destroyed. Beitar was the stronghold of the Jews, the last vestige of the Jews, and they waged a war against the Romans. The story of Bar Kochba, who had superhuman strength, that initially Reb Kiva even thought that he was Mashiach, and he referred to him eventually as Bar Koziva, the false one. And after everything was destroyed, the Rambam says that the destruction of Beitar was the equivalent of the Churban Habayis, of the destruction of Beis Hamikdash. The Nechra Ir, and the 5th tragedy was that the city of Yerushalayim was plowed under. That the Romans, they destroyed, they didn't leave a vestige of what Yerushalayim was in its glory. Destroyed everything. It was plowed under. Now, I always mention the name of Maral, that says it regarding a Gemara in Megillah, that what is the significance of 5? For instance, we find that the day that Avram passed away, Avram Avinu passed away 5 years before his time. Why did he pass away 5 years before his time? That he shouldn't see his grandson Esav going off the path and seeing that he's truly evil, which because God promised Avram that he'd pass away b'seva tova, in a good old age, and knowing what kind of grandson he left over, this would be contrary to that promise. So Hashem took 5 years from his life that he should not witness who Esav really is. But it says the day that Avram passed away, Esav violated 5 cardinal sins. 5. Murder, adultery, blasphemy, the most extreme, serious level of transgression. Hashem did not want Avram to be aware of this. So he passed away on that heresy. He said, Les din v'les dayon, there's no judge, there's no judgment. And if it would have been 4, it wouldn't have been bad enough. Seems to be, there were 5. He violated 5. So the Maral says regarding something else, that what does the number 5 signify? He says it signifies, for instance, 4, if you have 4 things in 4 corners, either one has no relevance to the other. It means it has no substance whatsoever. So how do you give it substance? If you put something in the center brings it all together. The center gives value to all that has relevance to that center point. Meaning 5 represents realness. It's the real thing. It's not happenstance, coincidental it happened. Say a person is overtaken by his desire, he commits murder, he commits adultery, whatever he does. So that's not the essence of the person. But 5 is an indication of the essence of the person himself. So that Esav committed 5 cardinal sins on that day, that was an indication that's the essence of Esav, that he's truly evil. Therefore, it had to be 5. 4 wouldn't have been that confirmation on Esav's essence. There were 5 tragedies that took place on Tisha B'Av. Say 4 things happen. It happens to be, it's happenstance. They happen to come out on Tisha B'Av. But if you have 5 tragedies, the most serious, severe tragedies in Jewish history, it was decreed that our forefathers should perish over 40 years. First and second Beis Hamikdash. Beitar, which is the equivalent of destruction of Beis Hamikdash, and Nechra Sho'ir, the city was plowed under, that they all take place on Tisha B'Av is clear confirmation that it's a day which is designated for the most severe levels of tragedy in the history of Klal Yisrael, which relate directly to our failing regarding our spirituality. That's what Tisha B'Av is. The question we once asked was, the first tragedies, the first four we understand. It was decreed that our forefathers should pass away. They were delayed. The generation that stood at Sinai, the vast majority did not enter into the land. First and second Beis Hamikdash, we understand how serious that is. The Beitar, over 1 million Jews were murdered, massacred. This was the last vestige of presence in Eretz Yisrael. Beitar, we understand. But after everything was destroyed, Nechra She'ir, why is that such a tragedy? You know, everything is plowed under. They didn't want to leave a trace of the glory of Yerushalayim, of the Jewish people. The only thing they left was what? Was the Kosam Aravi. That's the only thing what was represented our Jewishness, our glory. That's the only thing they left. The Western Wall. Everything else was destroyed. But what's the tragedy? If everything's destroyed, what's the tragedy? We find something similar. We find Lag BaOmer is during the days of Smira. Rabbi Akiva had 24,000 students, and they all died within a 33-day period. So there's a question, historically, what happened? Did they pass away till Lag BaOmer, then there was a respite, and then they continued until Shavuos? And that's how all 24,000 died? Or they all died up till Lag BaOmer, and then all 24,000 weren't there. They perished. Lag BaOmer is what? Is a Yom Tov. So you tell me what kind of Yom Tov is. 6 million Jews are killed. Yimach Shmam Zichram, the Nazis. So now that it's over, we'll celebrate. What are you celebrating? We'll mourn the past, right? It's a tragedy which is one of the worst tragedies in the history of our existence. 6 million Jews to be murdered, right? Here, finally, the 24,000 passed away. Now it's a Yom Tov. Now it's a time to celebrate. But what does it say? It says when the 24,000 people, students passed away, the world was like darkened. What did Rabbi Akiva do? He took 5 students that to recreate, there should be a resurgence of Torah. After the slate was cleared, now it's time to rebuild. It was a moment of rebuilding. And from that rebuilding, that was the future of Torah in Klal Yisrael. So that was Lag BaOmer. That was the moment of Lag BaOmer. Here, if it would have been what was Nechra She'ir? If there's no remnant, there's no trace of history, of glory, of anything. Now you ask the person, who are you? Where are you? We're a people in exile. We don't know where to turn. We find that the Gemara tells us that Golus is called Laila. It's night. It's night. Everything is dark. Everything is questions. You have no answers. Where do you go? Where do you go for the answer? If you go back in your history and you have a point of glory and you know who you were, then you know who you're supposed to be. But if there's total confusion and you don't know who you are, then you're lost forever. What the Romans, Yimach Shmam, wanted to accomplish, to destroy our past, because if you destroy the past, there's no identity of the past, there's no future. That is the Churban. That is the tragedy of Nechra She'ir. They wanted to plow under the city. By plowing under the city, that there should be no remnant of the past, they believed this is the way they'll obliterate Klal Yisrael, Chas v'Sholem, forever, that there should be no future. Therefore, the 5th is no less than the first 4, or maybe even worse, because after the first 4, there still could be a future. After the 5th, they were hoping there should be no future. Nevertheless, there's a guarantee. Hashem promised us Torah will never be forgotten from Klal Yisrael. Famous Rambam The Rambam says in Hilchos Talmud Torah that if a person has a choice to study during day or nighttime, the main study of a person should be at the nighttime. Why? It's based on a pasuk, a verse in Echo, which we read on Tisha B'Av, where Yirmiyah HaNavi says, who witnessed the Churban Abayis, he says, Kumi Roni Balaylo. Rise and sing out at night. Those are the words of Yirmiyah HaNavi in Echo. Kumi Roni Balaylo. So the Rambam says, Ein Rino El Torah. What is the song of the Jew? The song of the Jew is Torah. And what's Kumi Roni Balaylo? When you're going to study Torah, let it be Laila. But what was Yirmiyah speaking about? He saw the bleakest moment in Jewish history. Churban Abayis, destruction of Beis Hamikdash, Klal Yisrael being driven into exile. It's a time of confusion, darkness. It's night. It's black. He says, Kumi Roni Balayla. How do you dispel the darkness? How do you get clarity? How do you bring day 24 hours a day? Kumi Roni Balayla. By singing the song of Torah, in Rina la Torah, that puts things in perspective. You're able to weather every storm. If you have Torah and you study it and you submit to it and you internalize it, you have no questions. You put things in perspective, and then you merit siyata deshmaya, which gives you clarity. You do tshuva, you make corrections, you're able to influence others, you're able to have leadership, you're able to do everything. That's Kumi Roni Balaylo. These are the 5 tragedies. Therefore, B'shenichnas Av, since the worst, most extreme tragedies which befell Klal Yisrael happened on Tisha B'Av, the whole month itself is a month which is designated for tragedy for all time. Therefore, B'shenichnas Av mimati b'simcha. Therefore, you minimize any endeavors of joy. You minimize them during this month. The words of the Gemara, as you cried, B'chi shel chinam, I will give you what to cry in the future. I mean, what exactly is the midah keneged midah? What is the measure for measure? What is it? If a person has, as the Rambam says, there's a famous Rambam, when it says, Vayechzek Hashem es leiv Paro, God hardened the heart of Paro, what does it say? So the question is, what about Bechira? Where's free choice? How could he be held accountable? He had no free choice. So the Rambam says that a person could sink to a level of evil where God withdraws the free choice from the person. Free choice is a privilege. If you abuse a privilege long enough, God withdraws the privilege. And you have no claim. Because why does he no longer have free choice? You've chosen not to have free choice. That's what happens. God gives you clarity. You leave Egypt, you see 10 makos. You see Kriyas Yamsuf. You see everything. God displays his might at a level which is unparalleled ever in the history of Klal Yisrael. And despite that clarity, you see who he is and what your relationship is. You suspect that he's out to destroy you. That he will not take the giants out. He will not bring you into Canaan, that you conquer the land. So Hashem says, you know something? When you had clarity, you did not use the clarity. You shut your eyes. Therefore, in the future, you will not have clarity. And because we did not have sufficient clarity, that's the reason why we failed. Therefore, there was a Churban Bayis Rishon, there was a Churban Bayis Sheni, and there was a Beitar, and there's whatever followed, all tragedies. Why does a person sin? Because of a lack of clarity, not because he has sufficient clarity. So that's the midah keneged midah. That's the measure for measure. There's an obvious difficulty over here. We find that the Gemara tells us in Yuma that the reason why the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, the first Beis Hamikdash, was because they violated the three cardinal sins. That's the reason why the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. Migdash Rishon, Mevnei Machorav, the first Migdash, why was it destroyed? Mevnei Gimel Dvorim Shoyibah. There were three things, three very serious sins which were in place. Avodah Zarah, Shvikas Domim. Idolatry, adultery, incest, and shedding of blood, murder. And it cites a pasuk to indicate each one of them. By Sheni, why was the second base of Mikdash destroyed? Because the sin as chinam, unwarranted hate. Therefore it was destroyed. So the Gemara says, Av Mikdash Sheni shaya oskim b'Torah b'mitzvahs u'gemilas chasodim. Yeah, the second base of Mikdash, they were engaged in Torah study. And mitzvahs, and gemilas chesed, b'nei machorav. Why was it destroyed? They shoyse bo sinas chinam. Because there was unwarranted hate. The lamdoch, to teach us, sheshkula sinas chinam keneget shalosh averos. That sinas chinam is so severe, it's the equivalent of the three cardinal sins. Because the three cardinal sins was the reason for the first base of Mikdash to be destroyed. So, and by Sheni, they were devout Jews. So if they were so devout, why was it destroyed? Sinas chinam. I mean, is it really that serious? Evidently it is. It's as no less serious than the three cardinal sins. Therefore, it was destroyed. Okay? So the Gemara says, after the first Bayis, the first Beis HaMikdash, how many years were we in exile? 70 years. Even though we violated the three cardinal sins, Gilarai, Shvichas Dam, Avodah Zarah, after 7 years we returned. By Sheni, it's over 2,000 years, we're still waiting. We haven't recovered. Why? After sinning so seriously, and it's seen as so extreme, we came back after 70 years. So why haven't we come back after so many years? So Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Loza say, Rishonim shenizgal avonam, nizgal kitzam. The first group, the earlier ones, because the sin became obvious and could not be denied, therefore the end came to an end. You know, a person could justify murder, could justify idolatry, could justify many things. But after a while, you come to your senses, you say, this is unacceptable. But what's sinas chinam? Unwarranted hate. You always say, you know, the man, if you study the Chofetz Chaim, sometimes you say, it's a mitzvah to speak Lashon Hara about this person. Why is it a mitzvah? Because you have a basis to justify it, although it's never justified. It's not sufficiently justified. And you'll never come to the realization that you never even had a right to speak Lashon Hara about that person. So it was lo nizgal avonam. The sin was never revealed as a sin. You say, well, that's human relationships. It's a strained relationship. It's justified. Achronim shein lo nizgal avonam lo nizgal kitzam. Omer Rabbi Yochanan, listen to this. Tovet sipornon shel rishonim. The nail, the fingernail of the people of the first group has greater value than the stomachs of the second group. Omale Reish Lakish, so Reish Lakish, who was the premier student of Rabbi Yochanan, says to his Rebbe, Adraba, Achronim Adifi, the latter are greater. Avgav Diika Shibid Malchus, even though we're under the foreign governments, and there were all kinds of decrees. Ka'aski b'Torah. Despite that, they still study Torah, engage Torah study. Omalei. So Rabbi Yochanan says to his student, Reish Lakish, Bireh tochiach. He says, but the citadel is the confirmation of the truth. Shechazru lishonim. If you tell me they're greater because despite all the decrees, they still study Torah. That makes them greater, so why wasn't the Beis HaMikdash returned? The first ones, after 70 years, they returned. They were reinstated. By Sheni, it was never reinstated. So that's your evaluation. But as they say in English, the proof is in the pudding. Factually, we don't have a Beis Hamikdash. And it's all these years that tells me, despite the learning, despite the dedication, it's still not at the level of the first ones, because we still have that sinas chinam, and the sinas chinam is literally like the equivalent of a cancer, chas v'sholem, and therefore we haven't yet recovered. And until we recover from that, the bias is not going to be restored. The Chafetz Chaim writes in his introduction to Shmiras Haloshen regarding the laws of speaking negatively about another Jew, he writes, he says, the Yerushalmi, the Bavli says that the reason why the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed was because of unwarranted hate. The Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem Talmud, says it was because of Lashon Hara. But he says it's one and the same. Because there is unwarranted hate, therefore people speak negatively about one another. But they're not arguing. So he says, if when the Beis Hamikdash stood, it was enough that it should be destroyed. So to rebuild it, to reinstate it, there's no question we have to correct it. So he says, until Lashon Hara and the symptom, the court is really corrected and we're fully rehabilitated from that, the Beis Hamikdash is not coming back. Therefore, he feels how important it is to what? That we should have a clear understanding of what we're permitted to say, what we're not permitted to say, and maybe through that study, we will be zocher, we'll merit the siyata d'shmaya to make the correction on sinas chinam. The Netziv writes, I've told Yehuda Berlin writes in his introduction, the Hamak Dover, where he speaks about, the Gemara tells us in Avodah Zorah that Sefer Bereishis is known as Sefer HaYosher. It's the book of the straight ones. So the Gemara says, why is it called Sefer HaYosher? Because the Avos HaKadoshim, our holy patriarchs, they were Yesharim. And he explains what's Yesharim? That even though an average, ordinary person would have a conflict of interest and justify many things, they had a level of objectivity that they were able to rise above their personal feelings, and they did not allow that conflicts to interfere with their clarity. What's the proof? Avram Avinu was told, Avram Avinu disseminated monotheism throughout the world. They wanted to destroy him, all the pagan nations. Who personified evil? Sodom and Amorah. When Hashem says to Avram Avinu, Sodom and Amorah is going to be destroyed, what was the first thing he did? He should have he should have sung Hallel. Evil is being eradicated. What did he do? Immediately he took Hashem to task. Maybe there are 50 tzaddikim, maybe there are 45 tzaddikim, until Hashem says there's nobody there. They're all evil, they will be destroyed. I mean, how could a person, these are his arch enemies, they're God's arch enemies. How does he rise above it? That's Yesharim. Because he was a Yosher, he was able to ascend above that and have a level of clarity and actually to be mispal for them, to pray for them. Yitzchak, he was told by Avimelech, he was driven out, he was treated like a pariah, mistreated. Then Avimelech, the Philistine king, wants to enter into a covenant with him. Yitzchak agrees. Why? Because it was the right thing. But after he was hurt and he was castigated and he was displaced, everything, and the question of the wells, whose wells are, so on and so forth, you say, you know something? Not interested. But he was able to rise above that. Yaakovinu, he was mistreated and cheated and connived by his father-in-law endless times over. Aseres Monim, 1,000 times he cheated him, he changed the contract. When did he share this with his wives? Only after 20 years. How could you? To be mistreated and abused and cheated, how do you not share it? Because he was a Yosher. That until it was time to share it with his wives, when was told by Hashem that he must leave, only then did he call his wives out to the field and he shared this information. They Yesharim. So he says, this is his punchline. He says, why was Bayis Rishon Nechrav? Why was Bayis Sheni destroyed? Because of Sinas Chinam. He said, why? Where do we see Sinas Chinam? Well, what was the story in Bayis Sheni? The Gemara tells us in Yuma that the Anshe Knesset Agdola, after the Churban Bayis Rishon, what ravaged Klal Yisrael during the first period of time? Mainly idolatry. Jews became pagans. And Anshe Knesset Agdola, they destroyed the Yetzer Hara of idolatry. They destroyed it. So what's the new challenge? The new challenge is it's called tzdukim, Sadducees. Do you accept the oral law to be authentic, divine, or not? So you had the Tzdukim and you had the Prushim. This was the story. And there were major battles. And the Tzdukim, the Sadducees, tried to destroy Klal Yisrael, to destroy the Beis HaMikdash. Now, what about among the Prushim, if there be a disagreement? Among the Prushim, if there be a disagreement, were they able to have a meeting of the minds, or there was very strong conflicts even among the Prushim? So the Netziv says, what was Sinas Chinam? If it's Sinas Chinam, a person does tshuva. Why don't they do tshuva? If you don't agree with my position of what I consider to be Torah and truth, you're a Sadducee. So if you're a Sadducee, there's a mitzvah to hate you. There's a mitzvah to do whatever to be negative on you. So it comes out what they believed was a mitzvah, in essence, was sinas chinam. That's what it was. So therefore, that's the reason why we never recovered. We're not talking about just at a base level of sinas chinam. It's cloaked in mitzvah, with righteousness. This is holiness. This is zealotry. But maybe you should re-examine it. Maybe this. Maybe you should understand, maybe your position is not the only, maybe both positions are correct. Maybe your position is incorrect. Maybe. Therefore, that's the sinas chinam that we have recovered. But the difficulty is, the Gemara in Yuma says that what's the reason why the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed? Because of sinas chinam. Yet, the Gemara in the Durham tells us that the reason why the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed was because based on a pasuk in Echo al ozum es Torasi, because the Jews abandoned my Torah. That's the reason why it was destroyed. The Gemara says in the Dorim, Omer Rav Yehuda Marav, Rav Yehuda says his name is Mai Dichsiv. What is the meaning of the pasuk? Mi hoish hachochom v'yovin ezos. Who is the person who's wise and understands this? This question was posed to the Chachomim, L'Neviim, and to the prophets, V'lo Pirshua, and they weren't able to respond. Yeah, the question was posed to the Chachomim and the Neviim, and they weren't able to respond. Until God responded himself, Tichsiv, V'yomer Hashem, and this is the pasuk in Eicha, Al ozvom es Torasi. Do you know why the Churban came about? Because they abandoned my Torah. Hainu lo shamu b'koli, and that's the meaning. They did not heed my voice. Hainu lo holchabot. They did not follow the Torah. Omer Rav Yehuda Marav. In what way did we not follow the Torah? Shem vorchem b'Torah tchilo. Because they did not say birchas Torah. Could you imagine? What does it mean? They did not follow the Torah. They did not say birchas Torah. No, it's obvious. The Chachomim couldn't respond. The Neviim couldn't respond. Why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu destroy the Beis HaMikdash? Why? Well, if Jews are not learning and they're not behaving properly, it's obvious why he destroyed it. So what was so difficult? You don't have to be the great Chacham, and you don't have to be the great prophet. The answer is they were learning. But the learning was not predicated on Birchas HaTorah. Therefore what? So what? So over here there's a famous Ran which cites Rabbeinu Yonah Chosid, who explains the Gemara. What does it indicate if you study and it's not predicated on Birchas HaTorah? According to many Rishonim, Birchas Torah is a Doraisa. It's a Torah obligation. That before you study Torah, you have to first say a bracha. Hashem says they abandoned my Torah. Evidently, it wasn't obvious. Nobody could respond. Only God was able to respond. That means it was so concealed. The problem, it's like, you need a microscope to see the cancer cell, which magnifies it endless times over, otherwise you can't see it. You can't see it with the human eye. But if it's al-azm torasi, then only Hashem could respond. So evidently it was so subtle, it was impossible to know. But why was it so subtle? If they abandoned my Torah. This is the way it explains the pasuk. Why was the land destroyed? Because they did not say the bracha first. Because it means simply, literally, they abandoned the Torah. Jews didn't observe Torah, didn't observe Shabbos, Kashrus, anything. It was something which is obvious. It's revealed. And it's easy to explain it. So why was it so difficult that the Chacham and the Nevi'im weren't able to respond? Elavadai, this is the punchline. Elavadi as oskin hoyu batorah tomid. Yet they engage in Torah study continuously. Uleficha hoyu Chacham Nevi'im tmeim. Amav Doritz, they couldn't understand. So if the Jews are continuously committed, unceasingly in Torah study, so why did God destroy Israel? Why did He destroy the Beis Hamikdash? Why did He send us into exile? Pirsha HaKadosh Baruch Hu ba'atzmo, sheyudei mi'imkei halev shel yivorchem b'Torah tchila. God knows the depths of our hearts that we didn't say the Birchas, but who knows we didn't say Birchas? Every individual knows you didn't. It wasn't public knowledge. So therefore the Chacham didn't know this, the Nevi'im didn't know this. Klomar shel yisat Torah chashuv beineim kol kach. They didn't esteem and revere the Torah sufficiently. Sheiroi levorech oleo. That before a person studies physics, does he say a bracha? Before he studies some other medicine, does he say a bracha? Because that's not what it's all about. So the Torah, it's not what it's all about. If you would have revered it sufficiently, Asher bocha banu b'kol ha'amim, you've given us the ultimate gift. The Kli Chemda v'HaKadosh Baruch Hu, shlohei oskim bo lishmo. When they studied it, they did not study lishmo. Not for the sake of Torah, for the observance of the mitzvahs. Therefore, they took the bracha lightly. They did not say the bracha. What does it mean? They did not go in its path. They did not have the right intent. They did not study lishmo. These are the words of Harav HaChosid. The Ran says they're pleasant and appropriate for the one who said that, the Rabbeinu Yonah Chosid. So what does that mean? He's saying they studied, they were committed, they studied diligently, unceasingly, but only God knows the truth. It was not lishmo, it was not with the proper intent, they didn't revere it sufficiently, it was not the lumad amnaslasos, studying it. Their main emphasis was the intellectualism. Okay? The fact that we have a contradiction. Here it says, why was the Beis Hamikdash destroyed? Why were we driven into exile? Ama'av Doretz, al-ozmes torasi. The Torah was abandoned. The Gemara in Yuma says the reason why the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed because of Gimel Averos, the three cardinal sins. How do we reconcile both Gemaras? Is it A or is it B? Now, there's a famous Maral, the Maral of Prague explains, we find the appellation for the Torah to be called Torah. Where does that word come from? Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu, before he passes away, he says to Klal Yisrael, Torah tziv Elonu Moshe Moshe Kilas Yaakov. That's the first words you teach a child when he begins speaking. Torah tziv Elonu Moshe Kilas Yaakov. The Torah was commanded to us by Moshe. This is the heritage of Kilas Yaakov. Now, what is the meaning of the word Torah? Lahoros, to be Mora Derech. It's to teach you a path. It's to illuminate a Jew's life, how to teach him how to live his life. It's the prescription of life. That's what Torah is. That's Lahoros. It's Mora Derech. It gives us a direction, how to live our lives. That's what it is. but they didn't study it with that emphasis. That's not what it was about. They didn't study it lishma. They didn't study it lasos. That's not why they studied it. They didn't esteem it as for what it is. That this is if you want to have a relationship with God, this is what you have to do to observe the mitzvahs properly. That's what you have to do. But they didn't have that intent wasn't there. So if that's the case, it wasn't studied as Torah. Now, Chazal tells a number of locations throughout Shas, Barosi Yetzahara Barosi Lo Torah Tavlin. The Mesilas Hashem writes that the only antidote to the evil inclination is only Torah. There's no other antidote. Chazal tells, Barosi Yetzahara Barosi Lo Torah Tavlin. The only antidote for the evil inclination is Torah. You could come up and think or convince yourself and delude yourself. You have other ways to deal with this enemy, with this issue. Impossible. There's only one way. You need Torah. But what's Torah? Torah means it's lumanam laslasos. It only has that siyata d'shmaya. You only merit that divine assistance of clarity to incapacitate the evil inclination, which is so enmeshed, and it's part of every bit of our emotion, our mind. The only way to incapacitate him and to release him, the bonds of our neshama, is only you have to study Torah. Barasi Yitzhora, Barasi Torah Tavlin. The Torah is the Tavlin. The antidote is the Torah. But if it's lo bircha b'Torah tchila, but if they did not study, it wasn't predicated on the bracha of birchas Torah, what does that say? It was shlo lishmo. They didn't study it with that intent. So if they didn't study with intent, we'll call it chokhmah. But it's not Torah. If it's not Torah, then it's not the antidote. Once it's not the antidote, and that was really the quandary. It was like mind-boggling. They're here, they're studying day and night, and they find this person in a brothel. Doesn't make sense. He can find him committing adultery, committing murder, doing idolatry. How did he have a question regarding is there a God? Is there no God? Maybe the deity has power. How do you even have such a suffix? How do you have a question? After studying so intensely, how do you have this? They went to the Chacham and Lo Pirshua. They went to the Nevi'im. They didn't explain it. Achi Pirsha HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, Rabbi Yonah says, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows Mi'imke Alev, he knows the depths of one's hearts. And he knew that it wasn't predicated on the study on Birchas HaTorah. Therefore, it wasn't Torah. If it's not Torah, you don't merit the Siyata D'Shmaya. It's not that antidote. And once it's not the antidote, then there's no other way to deal with it. So what? He outwits you, he outsmarts you, he convinces you, and it's over. It's interesting, very interesting. We're dealing with Sinas Chinam. Sinas Chinam. The Chofetz Chaim writes in his introduction to the Shmir Saloshen that bases it on Zohar, that what quotes the Gemara. The Gemara says in Shabbos that the greatest Amorim said, one said to the other, that the world stands on Hevel Shel Tinok Shabis Rabban. The vapor that comes out of small children's mouths, the Torah they study, that vapor keeps the world going. So one of the Amorim says to Abaye, what about our Torah? He says, you cannot compare Hevel Sheish Bochet leHevel Shein Bochet. A child, regardless of what he says, it's pure. His vapor is pure. It's not tainted with sin. Our, as great as we are, we're not perfect, and therefore it's slightly tainted. And being tainted, the world doesn't stand on our Torah. Therefore, the value of a child's Torah is greater. Although it's on a very simple, most basic, elementary level, doesn't make a difference. Now, see, besides the Zohar, Torah has to be articulated. When a person speaks Lashon Hara, or Sheker, or slander, the mouth becomes vulgarized, becomes putrefied. As a result of that, the Torah that comes out of mouths afterwards becomes putrefied as a result of that Lashon Hara. The tefillah that we want to ascend to Hashem becomes putrefied because the mouth has been vulgarized through Lashon Hara, through Motzi Shemra, through all these extreme levels of what? Of transgression. As a result of that, it doesn't ascend. It's been minimized almost to a very small degree of value. So now we understand like this. So the Bayis Rishon wasn't Sinas Chinam, but it wasn't Torah because they didn't study it Lishma. So they didn't merit the Siyata Deshmaya. They didn't esteem it sufficiently because they didn't say the Birchas Torah. We say the Birchas Torah, but we have a new issue to contend with. We have Sinas Chinam. And how does Sinas Chinam manifest itself? You speak negatively about your fellow Jew. Jews that you're not permitted to speak. As a result of that, although maybe Torah, but factually the Torah that's coming out of our mouths, what happens to it? It's minimized to a level, therefore it's not the antidote any longer. You know, it's like you buy medication, it's past the expiration date. So it doesn't have the potency that it's able really to destroy the bacteria. There's no worse bacteria than the Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara is the worst. It has to be in its most potent form to incapacitate him. But if the words themselves that come out of mouths are attached with that impurity of Lashon Hara, it's beyond expiration date. It doesn't have that potency any longer. So what incapacitates him? So we get it totally confused. It's like a semi. You know, it'll dull the pain slightly. We think we're soaring, spiritually speaking. But within that soaring, you know, it's like a person dives out of a window and he thinks he's going into a 100-foot pool. And factually, there's nothing down below but just concrete. It's going head first straight into the ground. You may believe that, you may hallucinate that, but it's not reality. But again, that's the Sinas Chinam. The Sinas Chinam, Bavli says it's Sinas Chinam. But Yerushalmi, as the Chofetz Chaim explains, how does that manifest itself? It manifests itself in speaking Lashon Hara. If you don't like a person, Chofetz Chaim writes, he says, people who speak Lashon Hara, who originally are really culpable, the parents are culpable. He says, once a person is raised with a bad habit, and you feel you could say anything you want to say, regardless of how negative it is, even in the context where there's no constructive value, when you get older, all you can do is what? Is suppress the desire to speak Lashon Hara. You can suppress it. Because initially, you've acquired a very bad habit. To break, Rabbi Yisrael Salanter used to say, to overcome a bad habit, it's easier to learn through Shas in depth than change one negative characteristic within a person. That's how difficult it is. So he says, so how do you deal with it? He says, there's only one way to deal with it. One thing we know for a fact, one doesn't speak Lashon Hara about a person who he truly loves. So if a person has Avas Yisrael, and we increase our Ava to one another, so if you feel negative about another person, you always have to continuously suppress it. Ultimately, how long could you push a boulder up a mountain? Eventually it gets overwhelming, and eventually the boulder comes back and crushes you. That's if you feel negative about other Jews. What about you feel positive? You have true Avos Yisrael. Not speaking Lashon Hara. Why should I speak Lashon Hara of somebody I love? I wouldn't even consider speaking Lashon Hara. So that's the Chofetz Chaim, the way to tackle this issue. The only way you could tackle Sinas Chinam, and it shouldn't manifest itself in Lashon Hara, is only Avos Yisrael. It's very interesting. There's a sefer called Yesod V'Shush Avoda. He writes, in the name of the Zohar, that before we say the Shemon Esrei, you should think in your mind the mitzvah of V'ahavta l'recha kamocha. You know, the Shemon Esrei, in terms of its text, it's in plural. It's not singular. Slach lono avinu, barech oleinu. Right? Everything's plural. Why? Because we're not only praying for our slav, slach lono avinu kichotanu, hashivenu avinu. Right? Everything is plural. Why? Because we're not only asking for self, we're asking for our fellow. So before we start, a person should think in his mind, before you say Hashem sosai tiftach yagiti losecha, you think in your mind or visualize in your mind v'ahavta l'recha kamocha. But again, if a person, so what are we doing? Who do you pray for? Somebody you really like or you couldn't care less about. Are you going to pray for him? But somebody you have in mind v'ahavta l'recha kamocha, and that's why it's in the plural. And I have to be concerned for all Jews, it turns that those words could change your perspective. So I'm saying the only way we're able to attack and chip away at this issue of sinas chinam, we have to have avos Yisrael. You see a person, he's tinuk shenishba. He wasn't raised properly. He could be changed. You never know. Still your brother. Unfortunately, it's not simple. It's overwhelming, but factually it doesn't change the reality. But if, as the Chofetz Chaim says, if the Beis Hamikdash was nechrav, was destroyed because of what? Because of sinas chinam. Now that we no longer have to rebuild it, how much more do we have to correct this issue of sinas chinam? But I'm saying, the way it manifests itself, you could study, you could pray with all the kavan in the world, but factually, unless you verbalize it, it doesn't have the value. But the moment you verbalize it, what words are coming out of our mouth? It's words that become contaminated. He refers to it as ruach besavo. It's a contaminated spirit attaches itself when the words ascend, and because of that, they don't go up, they don't ascend, they're minimized. Just like to end with one midrash. The midrash is in Eicho, quotes the pasuk in Eicho, but it brings a pasuk, cites a pasuk in Daniel. Omer b'shuved Levi, b'chol yom v'yom baskol yotzes mar chorev. Every day there's a heavenly voice comes out from Har Sinai, Omeris, and says, it's Pirkei Avos, Oy lehem lebrias me'albonu Torah. Woe to humanity because of the disgrace of Torah. Torah is disgraced continuously. Shmuel Tani Lo, Shem Rishu Barasi, Emosai Akum Gozim Gzero Gzeros Matzlachas. When did the Gentiles, they issue decrees against Klal Yisrael, and the decree succeeds? B'sho Yisrael Mashlichen Divrei Torah L'Oretz. When Jews take the Torah, they throw it to the ground. No regard for it. Hu dechsiv quotes a posuk, a verse of Daniel. V'tzova tinosein al hatomid b'pesha. It's a posuk. Utzova tinosein. What does it mean? Ein tzova el akum. The word tzova is referring to the Gentiles. Shenemar yivkar Hashem al tzvo hamorom b'morom. Hatomid. Now this is very interesting. Why is Klal Yisrael called Tomid? Tomid means continuous. So the appellation for Jews is Tomid. Elu Yisrael. Why we call Tamid? Because there's a pasuk Yeshua, a Jew has to continuously, unceasingly study Torah. So here, the reason why we call Tamid is because we're supposed to study Torah continuously. The Pesha, what's the reason why the Gentiles succeed in their decrees against us? The Pisha Shel Torah, as a result of the sin of Torah. When Jews take the Torah and they throw it to the ground, they disgrace it. The Gentiles, they issue decrees and they succeed in their decrees against us. Shenemar, v'atashlech emes orza. When you take truth and you throw it to the ground, that's what it happens. Vein emes el Torah, and emes is Torah. Shenemar, emes kanev al timkor. You should acquire truth, don't sell truth. If you throw Divrei Torah immediately to the ground, the Gentile would immediately succeed, have the upper hand over us. When it's done, they succeed. It's a win-win for them. Chas v'sholom. That's when what? I got theater tickets. Do you know what these tickets cost? And therefore I can't keep my chavrusa, I can't study, I can't this. Sunday, it's a day off. I heard the rabbi's sermon on Shabbos. It's enough. I came 20 minutes before mincha. I could have stood outside and spoken nonsense. I listened to the rabbi's 20-minute Dvar Torah. Okay, so that's not a disgrace. For all the nonsense, you have all the time in the world. For Divrei Torah, you have your time clock ticking away. 20 minutes are up, you're out. Whoever heard of such a thing? So that's vatashleich emes orza. You take truth, you throw it to the ground. Quotes other verses. But I'm saying, even if the person is committed, Reishis Chochmah Yiras Hashem, Torah itself has to be predicated on Yiras Shamayim. If you have Yiras Shamayim, then you make whatever corrections have to be made. If a person doesn't have Yiras Shamayim, so you study, you say the brachas, mitzvahs, anosh b'lumodo. By rote, you say the bracha. Do you really have an appreciation of the limud amnas lasos? You enjoy it. I'll do my best. But are you truly doing your best? Are you making the corrections that have to be made? And if you don't, chas v'sholom, everything is literally in a most efficient level, as I use the word putrefied, which is the words of the Zohar, and therefore the value of the Torah is not as effective as it should be effective, and therefore the Yetzer Hara continuously has the upper hand.